Hey, are you tired of dense urban centers dictating how you live your life in rural America? Well, we understand, so are a lot of other people. In today's video, we're going to discuss that exact topic. We've had lots of questions about Greater Idaho. What is it? What does it mean? Is it even possible? Stick around. We're going to tell you all about it. Hey, if this is your first time to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button, tap the notifications bell so you can stay up to date on all of our latest content. Our team, real estate team, we get calls, texts, and emails every single day from people just like you trying to learn more about North Idaho. So if you're thinking about making that move, give us a call, text, or email. We would love to help you all along the way. All right, here we go.
All right, so today we're going to talk about the Greater Idaho Movement. If you're not familiar with this, type in Greater Idaho and pull up images, and you're going to see a new map that comes up that's going to show Idaho expanding into Oregon, California, even Washington in places to create a larger state of people that are politically same-minded. So
Yeah.
same-minded?
Similarly
minded.
You might be asking yourself why. Why? And I think you touched on it right there, Dave, is that you've got a lot of people, you know, these states, Oregon, Washington, California, they're they are currently considered very liberal, right? But you've got large populations that live in rural areas in there that are very conservative, and they don't feel like their vote counts. They don't feel like they can live their lives the way that they want to because they're being dictated by these dense urban populations, which are generally, are they all? Very blue pockets.
Yeah,
I don't know why why does it end up that way?
It ends up that way. So when you have those dense populations, and let's spice this up too, because I want to see if Greater Idaho could happen. We need some beach. We need some beachfront. So some Oregon coast would be nice. Yeah. So here's the thing, man. When you get all these people together, there is a disconnect between the rural areas and the urban centers, right? They each have their own things. And here's what's funny, and I'll throw this out there, is that if everything goes bad, if all the urban centers just disappeared today, we would still survive out in these rural areas. The rural areas, the hunting, the farming, the less, you know, the bigger tie to just nature and being able to provide for yourself and those types of things. The urban centers need those rural areas. But the rural areas have a tendency to be very conservative. They're a little more tied in, less technological, everything else like that. And I think people are just over it. They don't want to have all their laws and everything dictated and their taxes by everybody that's living in, honestly, an area that they're supporting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you look at, take Washington, for example. You say you're a farmer in eastern Washington, right? Beautiful country out there, very rural. You've been farming, your whole family's been out there for 100 years farming, and you know, you're used to a way of life. And let's just take guns, for example. And you have your guns and you love guns, and that's part of the culture. And now you've got the politics in Washington State, over in Seattle, right, which is super liberal, and they're telling you what you can and can't do with your guns. They're limiting the amount of ammunition you can buy. They're limiting the type of gun you can buy. They're making you get insurance for that gun that you've had in the family for 100 years, and it's just completely ridiculous and does not match the values and the way that you live. So it's deeply frustrating.
They're changing the rural environment based off of an urban, off of urban living is really what it is, and it sucks.
And as we can all see, that urban living is not doing very well.
No,
unless you love being surrounded by thousands of crazy, screaming homeless people crapping on the streets, like maybe you do. And we're soft-hearted. I'm not being mean. That's just the reality of it. And you can say otherwise, but go downtown Seattle and tell me it's different.
Yeah, I don't want to go into that. Go ahead.
We can. Okay, let's jump into some of the counties in Oregon that are involved in this, because Oregon, I think, is heads and shoulders above anybody else on actually taking steps to make this happen. There are 13 counties, Baker, Crook, Grant, Harney, Jefferson, Klamath, Lake, Malheur, Morrow, Sherman, Union, Wheeler, Wallowa, that are now they voted in favor of exploring this further. That's the first step in this. There's a lot of roadblocks, which we'll get into further down in the video, but it's interesting to see that many counties have actually put this up to a vote and decided, hey, we want to explore this a little bit. That's how pissed off and disenfranchised these folks are with the way that things are going with politics in their state.
Yeah, that's pretty tough. When you start to look at the fact that they're willing to consider moving over to another state, I don't know of any peacetime border changes.
No.
I mean, when you look at history, I was a history major in college because I didn't know what else to do. But whenever you see border changes, I mean, even in what's happening in Russia and in Ukraine right now, it's typically a wartime thing that happens. So whenever I hear about borders changing, even with states, you think, you know what, this could be a conflict.
Oh yeah,
it could be something that I mean, I couldn't imagine one state in the way that the U.S. is designed for one state to be able to take something else.
Right.
But to make this happen, I don't know if it's possible.
I don't know either, but Idaho's legislator in 2023 passed a resolution to begin talks with Oregon about the border change. So even at the legislative level in Idaho, it is being talked about. There's some hurdles, right? You've got some legal and political challenges. It requires approval from Oregon and Idaho state legislators. And here's the big one, the U.S. Congress. So I think that's probably where you'd hit the biggest roadblock.
Well, you think about the roadblock. So you look at Idaho's going to vote in favor for the most part, right? We would love to acquire part of Oregon. We would love to have more people that attribute the same lifestyle to people that live in Idaho. However, what state is going to give up part of it, especially understanding that the rural side, the farming and everything else supports Portland and Salem and all those areas, right? Those are their goods, to now turn around and say, hey, we're just going to give it to you.
Right.
Like that's going to be hard first.
Yeah. And another challenge, Idaho would be taking on a lot of land. There are some great resources there, but there's not necessarily a lot of money there, right?
Yeah.
So you're bringing on this tremendous land mass, not a huge population. I'll get into that a little farther, but then you have, how do we manage the infrastructure for that, right? Where do we get the money to do these things when we're not taking on necessarily large urban populations where generally a lot of the money's at?
Right.
Okay, so let's see, broader national, okay, we talked about that a little bit. We've got some graphics will pop up on the screen so you can kind of see what we're talking about.
Phase 1, phase 2.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here.
Look at that. That would be Idaho's shape.
Can you? It's kind of weird looking. And it would mess up a lot of stickers. And,
well, we would still have Joe Biden sniffing.
Yeah, that's true. I love that. Now,
so as long as you have Joe Biden still sniffing it, that's good.
Smells like freedom.
Right.
But yeah, it's a very interesting idea. And I'm thinking of would people still say Idaho's full?
I don't know.
That's a lot of land. Yeah, it'd be some amazing farmland. We would be
it's pretty typical though. I mean, we're looking at something in a different time in history. But when you look at the way that lines are drawn, just about everything is started as a larger collective, right? Usually under force.
Yep.
And then as you've had people move around and become more like-minded, just like we have in the US, you have, obviously your urban cities, people are very like-minded there, people out in the rural area, you can see it on voting maps and political maps. You start to get people that condense that are like-minded, just like North Idaho is very, very conservative. There's a like-mindedness here that doesn't necessarily have a reflection in DC or with the United States as it's turning right now. So this is normal for this type of stuff to happen. As for being able to actually legislatively redraw lines, I don't know.
So here's some interesting facts. The population impact. Now, I'm just talking about Oregon right now, not talking about Washington and Northern California. But the proposed addition of those 13 counties that we talked about would add approximately 380,000 residents to Greater Idaho, which, this is crazy. It would increase Idaho's population by 21%. Idaho's population currently sits about 2 million. So that's a pretty big influx. But, it's not huge numbers when we talk about how many people live in Seattle. For sure. And the combined area of those 13 counties represents about 62% of Oregon's landmass. So that's a lot of Oregon that would go away. I just don't see their state legislature allowing it to happen.
It would have to be, in my personal opinion, like I said, it's always a wartime thing when stuff changed. If you had enough people in Oregon that reared up and refused to pay taxes and caused issues for the state, and they were, we're not going to be governed by you anymore, and there was I don't want to call it a coup, right? But if there was enough people, those 380,000 people that said, we're just not participating with you, I think that's the only way that the legislature would finally say, you know what, this is too much of a cost for us to deal with all the issues that this is bringing. That's the only way I could see it happening.
I know exactly how to do it. You get Trump to go out and say that it's a terrible idea and he doesn't think that Oregon should split up, and all of the liberals would lose their mind and be like, you know what? No, we're gonna fuck that. We're gonna.
You know what? Have
we're
Elon Musk
split this.
Have Elon Musk put a Boardman's calling me. Have Elon Musk put a Tesla plant in that area of Oregon, and they won't want it anymore.
There you go.
That would be pretty cool.
That's a great idea. I think.
Tesla plant, and Trump's saying it's a bad idea.
A little psychological warfare. That's how we get this.
We can do this.
Okay, so currently the Greater Idaho Movement is really just talking about Oregon, but there are parts of Northern California that would love to do this. I've heard, the state of Jefferson, that kind of stuff in the past. Because you've got
the state of Liberty too.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, that's Western Washington or Eastern Washington and Idaho.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah. So you've got Northern California. I know people talk a lot of crap about California, right? But Northern California and other parts of it are extremely rural. Like there's some country folk in there, like rodeos, the whole deal. So, and they would obviously, their values align much more with Idaho than California. Same thing in Oregon and Washington. Why Washington has not been included in this discussion yet is because there hasn't been a measurable support. You've got Oregon who's done, 13 counties have voted on it, and it's just not happening in Washington yet. Now, Eastern Washington is farm country, except for that pocket of Spokane, right? That's a very dense urban area, so there'd probably be some pushback. And honestly, I don't know that we want Spokane. Maybe we can just carve that out.
I think the majority of people over there.
Okay. So we take Spokane. Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful city. And then the homeless people wouldn't want to be there anymore, right? I know it sounds terrible. I'm sorry. But so they would probably shuffle over towards Seattle, and Seattle would welcome them with open arms.
I think you should go back to your bench.
Giving needles out, doing the whole deal. I know I feel like a terrible human being saying that. I love people. I'm not saying anything against people, but damn it, there's some things that have led to that, right?
Homelessness if you look up homelessness, it's almost one of those things that has turned from what's the word I'm trying to look for? It's no longer, it's now like a choice.
It is.
I choose to be homeless.
And that has been your experience, my experience, right? And I'm not talking about the single mom who finds herself out on the street with kids and needs a help up.
Like the definition that it came from, right?
That's where it came from. I'm not talking about her. I'm talking about the fentanyl addict and still, right? That's a human. It's a son, daughter, whatever. But when given the choice, they will choose to be where they at. I know this personally because I have dealt with it. You have dealt with it as a firefighter and a cop.
It's hard.
They're where they want to be. So it is a very hard situation to deal with. I didn't mean to go into homeless things, but there you go. Okay. So that's why Washington hasn't really been thoughtfully included yet, but I'm sure lots of folks in Eastern Washington are rooting and cheering for this to happen because some people end up over there because of jobs, home prices, whatever.
The problem is that, a lot of this the ability to be emotionally invested in something, I talk about the Ukraine war. Nobody hears about that on the news anymore. It's still just as active. There's still all this stuff going over there, but people don't have, because of Instagram and Facebook and all the stuff that's out there. I mean, you get people that will listen to this podcast, the whole thing. Well, that actually takes some effort to do that, right? Yep. It doesn't take effort to scroll stories on Instagram and those things. And because of that, I don't think people have the emotional capacity to be able to draw this out for the amount of time that it would take. Right. Look at the Texas secession. I mean, how many times have you heard that? That got really, really high, and then people get tired, and then it goes away, and so on. So I don't know if people have the emotions to be able to deal with this.
Yeah, and you're right. I think it would require conflict or lead to conflict, and, nobody wants that.
Right.
Honestly. That's like
people get hurt. Conflict it sucks, but
yeah. All right, legal hurdles. Let's dive into this a little bit further. So, U.S. Constitution, Article 4, Section 3, changing state boundaries requires several things. One, approval by both state legislatures, and approval by U.S. Congress. So this has not happened in modern times, right?
Well, I mean, in modern times, yeah, but not anytime recently, like when we've been.
Yes, right. So there's no precedent. Nobody really knows how to do this or if it's possible.
It would be difficult.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it would be difficult. Like I said, I think it would be done easier with conflict than it would through a legislative action.
Yeah, and with how politically divided we are as a country right now, I just feel like it would open up some wounds, and in Congress, it just would stalemate.
Yeah, I think you have a better chance of a state like Texas securing its borders and saying, you know what, we're not part of the U.S. anymore, and forcing the U.S.'s hand to decide, do we want to inflict, harm on fellow Americans, or do we want to let this state leave the Union, right? I mean, Lincoln made that choice. The Emancipation Proclamation that everybody's like, oh, he freed the slaves. No, he didn't. He 100% did not free the slaves. Fact check me. The Emancipation Proclamation told the South, you can keep your slaves. Okay, plain text. You can keep your slaves. You can keep your way of life if you join the Union. If you continue to secede, we are going to declare your slaves free, and we are going to force you back into the Union. We're going to go to war with you. That's what it was. It was an Emancipation Proclamation that I will declare that everybody is free over there and there will be no more slaves when we take you back, which is what happened. He was not an abolitionist. He was an anti-slavery, meaning that he felt like the direction of the U.S. was to continue a certain direction that did not include slavery. He did not think that was the future of the U.S. But he knew that if somebody left, if we lost all those states, the Union would divide and it wouldn't be as strong. So I think, I really do think that if somebody, it would have to be a force to be able to, and put the U.S. in a position. You got to either hurt U.S. citizens or allow them to secede.
I'm kind of feeling like it would take that kind of level too, which, I don't want. Nobody wants that.
No. I'm not going to go fight people in Texas.
No.
Nope.
No. Let's also bring up that, I think these urban majority legislators just are not going to be willing to give up territory, right? It's never a good strategy to give up territory, even if you don't like the way these people vote.
Well, how do you get elected again in Portland if you vote to allow half the state to leave?
Well, the people that love you there
in Portland.
Yeah.
Yeah, those people.
You're gonna have a very majority both ways political spectrum, right?
Oh, yeah.
You'd have like super blue. What's bluer than blue?
I don't know. Purple. No, it's a mix. I don't know. I'm making shit up.
So they would lose. They'd lose tax-based political power and geographic control. Right now, that is all the farmland.
Yeah.
The meat.
Well, like I said, the urban
like
cities
that.
don't survive without the rural, right? Like
Right.
they want to complain about the fact that, that's like, you got to treat pigs better, but they've been out there serving bacon for years.
Yep.
And then people in the cities will say, well, we want you to do it more humane. And you want us to deliver it to you, and you want us to lower the cost, and farmers are fed up.
Yeah.
Dude, shut up. Like people in the city that want all this stuff to happen, they're so withdrawn from reality of what people do out in those rural areas. They don't even know where their food comes from.
Yeah.
But they want it there on time. They want it cheap. They want it humane. They want all this stuff. So they put in legislation that affects these other people. And that sucks. That changes the way of life for people that are not even involved, that are supporting your way of life.
I see if this happened, I see like this. Here you go. Bill Gates, the savior of the liberals, could come in and he could get his lab grown meat and
3D printed meat.
cloud seed just over the herb, and create this little dense population of extremely sick people. And then outside in the rural lands, everybody would be eating freaking farm fresh eggs and pasture raised meat and, going to church, and everybody be super healthy and happy. And I'm like, there you go. If you want to live that way and live in a city, then how about it? You can go eat some lab-grown hamburgers or whatever. That's fine.
Yeah, I think what's really leading to this, if you want me to be honest, not just guns and those things, but what you touched on originally is just the implications that come from big cities that are legislating rural areas and changing how they have to live in accordance with how they live in an urban area. It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, and I don't know if it hits a boiling point at some point, right? And maybe that's the emotion that's needed to push this through. Hopefully it's not the emotion that causes armed conflict, right?
Yeah.
Like Dave said, no, like I mean, I'm sure somebody out there will go do it, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to hurt other citizens.
You also have a boomers generation. That boomers generation is dying off now, right? Like they're retiring, they're getting older, and those are the ones that understood what it was like to stand up and say, "Hey, like I'm going to die on my feet as opposed to live on my knees." Those are the people that actually were willing to be in a conflict and willing to sacrifice their lives for it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we're just a bunch of sissy lalas. I hate to say it, but
No, you're right.
I mean, we don't know what it's like to say, you know what, I'm standing my ground, because the second that, you know, the government or somebody comes in and says, hey, we're going to take your house, we're going to fine you, people are like, all right, you know what, I'll just back down.
Right.
Where people before were like, no, you can take whatever you want, but I'm not, this is where I stand.
Yeah. Man, strange times.
It's different.
Okay, a couple other things to think about. Reassigning school districts, right? There's a lot of administrative complexity here. Courts and law enforcement. Okay, you've got two different states now that are, right? You know, you've worked in two different states.
Yeah.
The state laws are not the same. The DUI law in California, it's a different code in Idaho. And, you know, how do you work that out, right? That's a lot to deal with. Health and welfare systems, driver's licenses, there's another big one, taxes, property laws. All of these things would need to get ironed out. And these things have been ironed out over decades. And now you'd have to do it again. And it would be pretty challenging. I don't know. Maybe they would just adopt Idaho's codes and laws. That would be the easiest way to do it, I guess.
It would be.
Not that we're perfect, but we're damn near it.
I think you're about to hit the most important part right here
What's that?
with the national precedent.
Yes.
If you were to allow, even under peacetime, for any part of any state to be absorbed by another state, especially due to political realignment. Okay, that's the biggest one. You take something, I mean, we know that the freaking government has just jacked everything up with gerrymandering and freaking setting everything up so it's going to vote a certain way. But if you were to allow a single county, to realign out of one state to another because of political preference, man, I think you would open up a can of worms that you would create political alignment all across the U.S., which might be a good thing. And it would end up isolating these democratic areas into these very small urban areas that all of a sudden become extremely dependent on the goods and supplies of the rural areas.
Yeah.
It would absolutely, I think that's the biggest thing. It would decimate the urban areas.
And I can think of so many places across the U.S. You know, you've got Illinois, right? Illinois is pretty rural once you get outside of Chicago, but I'm sure they don't want anything to do with Chicago, right? So there's one. I grew up in New York, and if you get outside of New York City by a couple hours, it's all farmland as far north as you can go, and it gets super rural. So there would be, many states would start trying it.
I think that is what the government is afraid of.
That would be a shit show. That would be a complete shit show.
One county, and people go, we could do this?
So I think you're right. I think that alone would shut this thing down so hard.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't see a way to get around that. Think of all the maps that would have to get changed.
Oh, they would be insane.
I mean, we're already changing the Gulf of America. Like, that's changing maps left and right. I mean, the shit would get real wild. I don't know.
Did you hear they're changing the name of New Mexico?
No.
I'm kidding.
No.
It's possible.
New America? Like, where are they going?
Yeah, I don't know. All right, what else?
You know, I don't want to keep beating a dead horse. I think we hit all of these topics. There are a lot of pros and cons to it, but I think, like Dave said, I don't see it being a possibility, like an actual possibility. It's fun to think about, but yes, you set that precedent. There's no way.
Well, let's throw this out here too. People who live in Oregon, Washington, people that are in these areas on this map that would become Idaho. We have so many people move from Oregon and they say how much they love, how beautiful it is, but it's just the politics is why they're leaving. It's political realignment, right? Yeah. It's not geographic. They're actually having to move somewhere else. We're not able to draw a line around them. But if they could, would you stay in Oregon if we redrew the lines around you?
Ooh.
I'm interested.
Killer question.
I think a lot of people would.
I think they would too.
People could have their political rights back and know that they're with a state that supports the union, that believes in the American fundamentals, that is conservative. I think they would stay.
Because I think you're right. I think you're 100% right, because those areas, I mean, we talked to a lot of guys like retired and they've been, living in Oregon 60 years and man, they love it. but they can't align with the politics. And a lot of times it comes down to gun laws and things like that are just really important to guys and women, these people. So I think you're right. I think they would stay and not move to a place like this. I mean, we've seen incredible growth in North Idaho in the last few years, and it is because of the political realignment. 100%. Yeah, it's beautiful up here, but it's beautiful in a lot of places. That's not it.
Yeah, look at California.
Right.
There's not a more beautiful state, man. There's so much.
Super geographically diverse.
Great weather.
Yeah.
Why would you leave?
Right, exactly. You leave because you can't live the life that you want. You can't raise your kids the way that you want because you're being dictated by these dense rural or urban populations. And that's incredibly frustrating. I mean, it's so important to some people. We have seen so many people upend their lives, take 50% pay cuts, do crazy things to get their families out of these places so that they have control over how they're raised. It is nuts. I don't know a good solution. I don't know if Greater Idaho is the solution or things like it. I don't know if it's possible. But like Dave said, we would love to know your thoughts on it. So shoot us a comment. We will answer. Unless you're mean, then you don't get an answer. I don't let Dave look at those.
I don't get to look at any of the comments. Apparently I will reply. So,
but honestly, we would love to hear it. If you got a bad comment, be polite, but let me hear it. I want to know.
And if you disagree with us, we're still looking for somebody with a completely different political perspective to come on here and have a discussion. I'm not going to deal with anybody yelling, but if somebody wants to come on and have an actual different political view than what we have, I'm all about it.
Yep.
100% I'll support it.
Well, thank you guys. I hope you got some good information out of this. Maybe you got the old brain juices flowing a little bit, and we will catch you on the next video.
Have a good day.